Discussion of a possible ordinance regarding the permit to allow up to 4 hens on property in the city.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
Any discussion?
No. Well, I've had a lot of people call and text me that are not really in favor of this. And we do have some questions that if this occurs, who's going to enforce this? We have the animal control that's going to enforce it, because I believe we have some places still in the city of Covington that do have chickens already. And so I'm just giving you some of this information that, if you do have them, of course, there's no roosters.
Yeah, no, yes.
It would have to be hens, and I think there's quite a bit of understanding people that are not really for it.
What I will say is, so the intent was to start a discussion, considering that we do have folks that actually have hens, and even in some instances, roosters on their property. One, trying to discuss what is the path forward with that, especially considering there's quite a few localities in the Roanoke Valley that have actually passed ordinances that do allow hens on folks' property with a annual permit. And typically, from what we've seen, Mr. Tyree and I looked into it, the localities are having it as part of zoning and property maintenance as well with land use. So it was just, as we do our job to try to keep up with what goes on in other places, putting something on the table for discussion.
Is there any kind of orders in place now that says you can't?
It says you can't.
It says you can't.
I think one of the issues we have too is it's difficult to enforce. So it was trying to figure out, is there, clear, clean-cut language that would just be how we enforce it strictly from a civil penalty process or something like that versus going to court, or if we allowed it, how we would manage a permit process or being able to revoke somebody's permit and those sorts of things.
Put it on the agenda.
I mean, again, it was really intended for discussion, considering that there's quite a few localities in the Roanoke Valley that have adopted ordinances. So bringing something up, especially considering I know we all have the desire to enable, especially from my perspective, staff to do their job in an effective or efficient manner. And there are areas, and this is one area where Mr. Tyree does struggle at times when he tries to enforce certain portions of ordinances and things not being as easy as, being clear as mud at times. Did I do justice, Mr. Tyree? That part of it? That it's not always clear as mud what you do?
Well, a lot of the things are interpretation. As far as what I do, the current ordinance is pretty clear cut. No keeping of fowl is what it says. Fowl defined as a very large variety of birds. And I tell people no quite often, and when we discover people with them, we usually force removal. It's usually myself or the ACO talking to them, and depending on the level of involvement it takes, one of the two of us force them to remove their chickens to somewhere outside the city or somehow get them out of here. If you wish to have an urban hen ordinance allowing it, this just simply lays the groundwork for a way to allow that to occur, and a permitting and an inspection process annually to ensure that they're in compliance with the terms and conditions of the ordinance. It's just something, as Ms. Oneida said, for you all to consider and discuss if it's a direction you want to head or not.
So we used to have a special use permit available. Cows, horses. Did we change that?
No, the special use permit is still there. But addressing urban hens as something that you don't want to, it's another way to keep them having to go through a special use application and process for each individual time someone wants to do it. Honestly, I think that's a little bit of an improper use for a special use application. It's not, you can't hear most anything under the special exception or special use process, but it's not generally used in most localities very often for that type of.
So what you said was this would create a permitting process
Permitting process.
that would,
Basically allow people to have chickens? I mean,
I don't
With
know.
an inspection process.
Yeah, inspection
and
process, but-
requirements. It's still,
It's going to open up the door.
and
for other
it's
things.
literally, we looked at the exact language other localities had.
I mean, you know, that's a possibility.
I tried to model the ordinance based off of other localities. I was asked to draft it, and I drafted one based off of what other localities were doing. We settled on a relatively low number of animals, hens only, in the discussion process. We settled on a $30 annual fee. So you would pay $30 annually. There's restrictions on how close you can put them to their neighbors' property lines. There's restrictions on the coop size as far as square footage per the amount of birds you have, with a total of 4 being the maximum. There's a requirement for them to have a pen, and I would come annually and look at your setup to make sure you're in compliance. So if you choose to do this, I think you can see I tried to model it where it's pretty restrictive, that it's got a lot of control measures there to handle it. But at the end of the day, it's totally council's decision.
so what kind of farm animals do we have in the city today?
The ones that are allowed by special use permits that I'm aware of are horses and cows in certain locations.
Now,
I don't know if any of those that are here legally. When we discover those, we usually force removal of those.
so there used to be the horse fields down behind the Edgemont Jeter Watson. Are those horses still down there?
Behind Edgemont,
Down over the hill toward the road, there was
those don't
horse
have a
fields.
current special use permit that I'm aware of, and I don't think there's anything down there. And you're referring to where the wastewater lift station is, down behind
No,
Whitey's?
back up the river from that.
Back up the
Toward
river.
Potts Creek, where Potts Creek feeds in.
Mhm.
There's a field down
On
there.
Jasper's field,
Well, it's up on.
behind Gum or getting Gilliam down there?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, behind Gum and
Yeah.
Gilliam, that's the same area, you know, it's between Whitey's and up there. I don't believe there's any livestock there
And
any
then
longer.
Frank Haynes used to come every year and get a special use permit.
Frank Haynes
One
special-
cow and one horse.
Frank Haynes still has his special use permit, still active. As you recall, there's not an annual renewal process, but I go out administratively once a year, look to make sure people are complying with the terms of the special use.
So then we've got horses in South Covington.
That's agricultural zone though.
It's conservation zone district, which inherently allows agricultural uses as defined in our.
But it still has to have a special use permit.
That one does not.
Because
That one's a by right use because our CN district specifically allows agricultural uses.
So if you created a 4-hen policy, can it be restricted to certain locations?
Yes, we could restrict it to certain zoning districts, certainly, if you want to embed it that deeply. And if I remember right, and I don't have the draft in front of me, I believe it was restricted to certain zoning districts. I think it was R1, 2, and 3, but not 4, because it excluded mobile home parks, multifamily residential units, which would all fall in R4, or, you know, mobile home parks are specifically designated as such, but exist in the R3 zoning district generally. It's a complicated topic.
And The agenda item tonight says a discussion of possible ordinance.
Yeah.
It doesn't say anything about adding it to the agenda.
No,
It was
It's
just for
just
discussion.
it's just discussion.
That's what I'm doing. We're discussing. I just, yeah, I can think of places in the city that it may be workable, but then I think about over at David's house.
On my street, there'd be 88 chickens right on one street. And
You got, I
Yeah.
think those lots over there are 37 and a half feet wide.
They're not very wide, yeah, there's, you know, the higher
So
the
every
number in the
37 and a half
orange,
feet, you're gonna have 4 more chickens.
yeah, the more densely the housing is
Yeah.
packed. Yeah.
I don't draw a line in the sand, dig my heels in, get very dogmatic very often, but I can't see any indicator where I'd ever approve this. I just don't see it. And, you know, I appreciate you looking into it, but for one thing, I've gotten way, after people saw it in the paper that it was going to be on the agenda, I've got a ton of people reaching out to me in just the last 2 days alone, and just the common sense factor on it of what could go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things out there that could go wrong, conflicts with other animals, drawing in animals from the edge of town that you don't particularly want. There's a lot of things to consider.
It is, it is. Does anybody have anything else they want to ask or say? I would say we've had a discussion. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.